Amid the rising threat of tariff wars led by US President Donald Trump, Indian pharmaceutical companies plan a strategic pivot. Focused on export diversification, increased R&D and establishing compliant manufacturing bases abroad to stay globally competitive. Experts believe that if the Trump administration reintroduces or intensifies tariffs on Indian pharmaceutical imports, it would significantly disrupt India's $8 to 10 billion annual pharmaceutical exports to the US, a critical market that accounts for over 30% of total Indian pharmaceutical exports. Although the direct impact remains uncertain, the Indian pharmaceutical industry could indirectly bear the consequences of US tariffs on Chinese goods, which may disrupt supply chains and raise the cost of finished formulations in India. News 18 reached out to several pharmaceutical companies for comments, but most declined to respond, citing a wait-and-watch approach amid ongoing developments. However, most of these companies, speaking off the record, told News 18 that they don't anticipate a major fallout for generic drugs, as higher costs would primarily impact American consumers. Industry insiders believe that the brunt of the impact will likely be felt by Big Pharma's patented medicines. While the scenario is still not certain, pharmaceutical firms predict a significant disruption for patented medicines, with generic drugs largely unaffected. Another scenario some see as a potential downside if trade tensions escalate could be where Indian pharma companies may be compelled to absorb tariff costs on certain high-value generics or new chemical entity drugs. There are practically no cheaper alternatives for the US to rely on when it comes to generic drugs, and the US can't substitute the supply chain in-house. Now, the main question in focus is how India can respond to Trump's tariffs. The Indian pharma industry must avoid knee-jerk reactions like aggressive cost-cutting. Aggressive cost-cutting to match the new cost could compromise regulatory compliance with the US FDA or European Good Manufacturing Standards. Instead, they should diversify their export geographies, scale up R&D investments to move up the value chain, and establish FDA-compliant manufacturing bases in the US or Mexico to insulate against tariff exposure. If the Trump administration reintroduced or intensified tariffs on Indian pharma imports in a discriminatory or protectionist manner, it would be violative of Article 1 of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade 1994 and subject to challenge before the World Trade Organization or WTO's dispute settlement body. India can also invoke retaliatory trade safeguards under Article 23 for nullification or impairment of benefits under the WTO framework. Also domestically, Indian authorities may utilize Section 25 of the Customs Act 1962 to offer exporters exemptions or relief from certain duties to counter the adverse impact of US tariffs. Additionally, broader trade support measures can be introduced, enabling the government to recalibrate export obligations and incentive schemes in strategic sectors like pharma. At the same time, pharma companies must not rely solely on WTO dispute resolution, which is a slow and politically sensitive process, but rather push for expedited bilateral trade dialogue through the Indian government and industry associations. Overall, industry insiders believe that a combination of legal preparedness, domestic policy support, and strategic market realignment is essential for Indian pharma companies to remain globally competitive and legally insulated against unilateral US protectionism.
I don't see any serious problem for Indian generics in light of these tariffs. As on date, we are the largest exporter of generic formulations to US. At the same time, nobody in the world can manufacture this much of volumes at this cost in the world. So we are not having any competitors. At the same time, 30% of our exports are going to USA, and they also know that they are getting benefited out of our generic formulations. So from 2013 to 2022, USA benefited almost 1.3 trillion US dollars by purchasing generic medicines from India. So the second point is that it is USA is a very important destination for us. So we need to continue doing business with US. At the same time, we need to focus more on other markets, the markets like Africa, Latin America, ASEAN, CIS, and Europe. So we are doing this, and our exports have already crossed 30 billion as per the DOC quick estimates. So I don't see any problem. At the same time, the President of America has to give a preference to Indian generics. So he cannot equate India and Indian pharmaceutical industry with any other country. So he should be very liberal in handling with Indian generics and Indian pharmaceutical industry.